What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Ryan Murphy, and I'm very pleased to be here today with Phil Hester, wonderful comic book writer and artist, worked in the industry for a long time. This is my second one we've done on this channel after my wonderful interview with Jimmy Palmiotti. And if you haven't yet, go ahead on the channel and check out my film Christmas at Wayne Manor. It's a Batman film I made for about $40,000, and it'd be worth it if you would take a look. So please do that. But in the meantime, here we are with Phil Hester. Mr. Hester, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
A lot of people might know you from all the comic books you've done, but what people might not know about you, and if someone like me is very interested in, is that you're a native of Iowa.
Yes.
And from what I understand, you're still in Iowa. Is that correct?
Yeah, I live in. I moved away and came back, but I'm back in the town I grew up in. Yeah.
Okay. Just going off of Wikipedia and all my research that I've done before this interview, you're born in North English, Iowa, correct? In Southeast
Well, actually,
Iowa.
I was born in Cedar Rapids, and then my family moved around a lot. We spent some time in Boston and Oklahoma City, and then came back to North English when I was a teenager. And I moved away for college, and my wife and I spent some time in the Knoxville, Iowa area. And then we moved back to North English when we decided to have kids. So, yeah, I always describe North English as it's a really small town. So it's kind of hell to be a teenager here, but it's kind of heaven to raise a teenager here.
I gotcha. Yeah, very cool. Yeah. I did notice it was like the Iowa City area code when I got your number. It was
Yeah, when we want to do anything, we go into Iowa City.
Gotcha. So, and speaking of Iowa City, you, like me, are a alumnus of the University of Iowa. Go Hawks!
Yes.
A class of '88, I believe you were in, and
I am. Yep, '88.
Yeah. So, what did you major in college? Were you already at that point looking towards going into art?
Oh, for sure. I have a BFA in technically in drawing, with a minor in sculpture. And while I was there, I took a lot of. I had kind of a very classical humanities sort of education there. I clept out of a lot of science and math, so I never took a second of science or math in college. It was all like creative writing or poetry or art. So yeah, I definitely knew I wanted to make comics at that point in my career. I'd been making them for myself in high school and junior high, and I actually started working in the industry based off samples I submitted between my sophomore and junior year in college. So I started working for just so your readers know the timeline, that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sort of set off the black and white explosion in the comic industry in the mid 80s. So overnight there were like dozens and dozens of brand new publishers that were putting out comics without color in them. And they needed talent. And even though I probably wasn't ready to be working, I was good enough to work in those books. So I started working when I was a junior in college.
Okay. And at that point, you probably, like, I'm trying to think about like when you said you moved away and everything. I'm not trying to like lock down all your whereabouts or anything, but I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious about like today, like the writers and artists who work for DC live all over the country, if not the world.
Yeah.
They can just scan or whatever they're doing and send it off. But that probably wasn't possible in the 80s.
No, I fully anticipated that I would have to move to New York. Because that was like the natural life cycle of a cartoonist at that point, was to move to New York, when you could actually live in New York fairly cheaply, get a roommate and start hanging out at the Marvel and DC offices to pick up assignments.
Yeah.
But in the mid 80s, luckily, FedEx started to come to prominence. And faxing started to come to prominence, and we couldn't yet scan your pages in, but you could FedEx them in overnight. And suddenly both Marvel and DC got a lot more open to the idea of their freelancers living outside of the New York area.
Oh, okay. Cool. Well, obviously, I think it's arguable, but I think maybe if we were to pick out your sort of most famous work, it'd probably be, at least as far as I've been able to tell, the Green Arrow run from the early
Yeah.
2000s. And I want to talk about that because you've been in the comic industry for a long time. So I hate to skip over
No, that's
anything
okay.
else. Yeah, anything else that you've done. I mean, but uh, because this is about 12, 13 years into your history. But going into that series, what are some of the highlights from that? I mean, obviously you work with a number of writers, most notably Kevin Smith on that. But after he left, you did 45 issues from 2001 to 2005.
Yeah.
So what were some of the standouts from that run for you?
For me, it was just a matter of finally being accepted as a DCU artist. Like up to that point, I was always kind of a tweener. I was always like not quite artsy enough to be a Vertigo artist, even though I'd drawn Swamp Thing for 3 years. And I wasn't quite like shiny enough to be a superhero artist. So I was always kind of a tweener. I was always like, in the twilight of the comic book industry, kind of wandering and picking up gigs here and there. But Bob Schreck, who was my editor, really went to bat for me, and my inking partner, Andy Parks, he really went to bat for us and said we could, we not only had our work changed enough that would be accepted in the mainstream of the DCU mainstream had changed enough that we didn't really stick out like a sore thumb anymore. So, just the fact that I could have a number one book. I mean, for a while it was the number one book in comics, not just the number one book at DC. And that was like an impossible thing for me to consider even like 3 years before that. So, and of course, working with all the writers that I got to work with, Kevin and Brad and Judd, I write comics myself. So I learned a ton as a writer working with those people. And I also learned about how to adapt to different writers' styles and sort of play to their strengths. And it definitely made me a better artist all the way around. And I got to draw all these cool characters that I had loved since I was a kid and wanted to finally get my hands on.
Absolutely, yeah. And you, I think, based on your collaboration with Kevin Smith, in that you went in and made a Clerks comic book for him as well.
Actually, that came first. We did a Clerks comic in the late '90s.
Okay.
Again, this had to do with Bob Schreck, and that's I think how Kevin sort of knew I could handle his scripts. It was from that Clerks one shot we did, and then also he was a fan of my run on Swamp Thing, so he originally wanted Joe Quesada to draw Green Arrow.
Oh boy.
But around that time, Joe Quesada got this other job. Running
Marvel.
Yeah. And so like Kevin sort of moved down his list of like cartoonists he was comfortable working with. And because of that experience on Clerks, and because we had just started developing a Mallrats comic that never came out. Don't look for it. It doesn't exist. But we had started developing a Mallrats book, and when Green Arrow came along, so he was comfortable with me, so we sort of switched over to Green Arrow.
Yeah. And you're telling me that Kevin Smith started developing something that he didn't finish? Come on, that's
shocker.
Difficult to believe.
I think as a filmmaker yourself, there's for everything that actually makes it to completion, there are 10 things that don't happen.
Yeah.
And that's true in comics and film, television, everywhere. You got to put 10 irons in the fire to pull one out.
That's a good way of putting it. That's very good. Thank you. But that's interesting. So you referenced writing comics, and it's kind of interesting because I'm not sure. Again, there's not really like a full like IMDb thing for comic creators at this point. Although I'm actually getting one made. So it's a little bit difficult to tell when you started writing. But there was one thing about how you kind of had to pick up Joe Straczynski's pen when it was down on Wonder Woman. Or was that the beginning of your writing, or was there
Oh
something before?
no, no. I'd been writing since, like I said, I was making comics for myself in high school
Mhm.
and college, and I'd always been writing comics. And it's just a matter of, I think my artistic skills got marketable before my writing skills.
Sure.
And about about the same time that I started on Green Arrow, I wrote a comic that I didn't draw, which was new for me. In the past, everything I'd written was stuff that I was going to draw as well. In the mid '90s, I wrote and drew a book called The Wretch, and it got nominated for an Eisner, it got some recognition, but it was never a big seller.
Mhm.
And then about the time I did Green Arrow, I was also writing a book called The Coffin with artist Mike Huddleston, and that got a lot of like critical acclaim, and it was a pretty good seller for Oni. And James Cameron wound up optioning it,
Wow.
um, and Guillermo del Toro wrote a treatment for it. And it's never going to come out. Here's another thing that'll never happen. But it's cool. It was cool to like move in those circles and meet those people.
Yeah.
And it also gave me some confidence as a writer. So from there, I was always writing like indie projects.
Mhm.
But Wonder Woman was like my first like full-time mainstream DCU writing gig.
And that was interesting. I've never, so never heard of Straczynski kind of backing down for project and having his. So did you start from his notes and then kind of take it in your own direction, or was it mostly
Yeah,
just?
we his notes were I like, I'm not privy to the exact like mechanics of his departure from the series.
Mhm.
I think it had more to do with him getting busy with other projects,
Sure.
especially film and television stuff. So he left, and he left us some notes, um, like about half a page of notes, and I had to build that into like a year's worth of Wonder Woman stories.
Mhm.
And they were pretty, I mean, they were pretty vague, but but it was a solid structure. And he left us with a compelling mystery of like, why doesn't Wonder Woman know who she is? Why is she wearing pants now? Stuff like that. And we had to find a way to sort of not exactly like return Wonder Woman to her status quo, but at least reconcile this departure that JMS had created with the larger Wonder Woman lore. And for me, that was a lot of fun because I got to. She has actually a pretty good rogues gallery, so it was
Mhm.
fun to like kind of take her on a tour of that rogues gallery and reintroduce her to her own lore. And it was a rewarding experience. It was kind of, it was. Uh, I think other writers would have seen that as kind of a fraught assignment. Like it was dangerous to sort of follow somebody like JMS, but I was just so eager to work, I didn't care. I jumped in with the.
That's great. And the interesting thing about that run on Wonder Woman is I think it's, if not the last, one of the last. It was right towards the end of the initial DC era before everything got rebooted in
Yeah,
2011. So
it was right before New 52, and they thankfully they let me know that was coming, and I got to write sort of a coda to my run that sort of segued into that New 52 relaunch. So it wasn't an abrupt cutoff.
sure.
It was sort of a natural progression.
Well, that's good. That's good that you got to do that, because if I ever get to interview Jeff Johns and be like, "What the hell was with leaving Green Lantern on basically a cliffhanger before everything got rebooted?" There's
Yeah,
wow, not everyone
but
was that fortunate.
there's so many moving parts even in a little industry like comics that sometimes things just fall through the cracks, and uh, it's hard to assign any sort of blame for them. It's it's one of the pitfalls of the business.
Sure. Well, like I said, you're very prolific as a writer or as an artist. You've done a great number of things. What, like, as a writer, certainly, again, I'm very frustrated with the lack of like a perfectly uh,
Right.
delineated IMDb for comic book creators. But like, I can tell you've written Scooby Doo, you've written Swamp Thing. You mentioned being a drawer on Swamp Thing, but you actually got to write it eventually. And what's you like? If you were to sell yourself to some fan right now, be like, hey, I'm a pretty good writer. You should check this out. What would you say? Like,
I'd send them to my creator-owned stuff probably. Even
okay.
though I had long and rewarding runs on both the Wonder Woman and the Darkness, and
Hmm.
I'm proud of the work I did on those. The stuff that's closest to my heart is the creator-owned stuff, like The Coffin or Deep Sleeper or Golly or Stronghold. Any of those things that I created and then I owned and I started from scratch. I feel
Sure.
like those are the best reflection of like sort of my whatever my vision as a creator.
Yeah. Of course, that makes sense. And as far as like what's the newest? I think the newest thing we have is that you did one issue of Superman in 2021. But and just it was just the one issue too. But I mean, what's coming in 2024 from Phil Hester?
Oh well, I mean, since that Superman run, I did a mini series called Gotham City Year One,
Okay.
and it's sort of, and that was with Tom King, and
Oh wow.
it was sort of the secret origin of Gotham City, how Gotham City went from a bustling, shiny, mid-century space age city to sort of the hellhole, the corrupt hellhole it became. And
Yeah.
it's Slam Bradley, who's one of DC's oldest characters. It's a
Yeah.
detective story set in the early 60s, and it's about, how Gotham City got so messed up and how the Wayne family is probably responsible for that. And so in a way, what Batman does every day, what Bruce Wayne does every day is almost penance for what his grandparents did in this miniseries. So I encourage people to get out and buy it. I think it's the best work of my career as an artist. Tom really knocked it out of the park. My inker Eric Gapster and the colorist Jordi Belair also did like career best work. So I would recommend people run out and buy that. Um, and just recently, I came back to Green Arrow to do a fill-in issue
Mhm.
that featured one of the villains that we created during my run with Kevin, Onomatopoeia.
Okay.
And he comes back for kind of an issue-long knockdown drag-out fight, which was a lot of fun to draw. So those are my two most recent things.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And that's all DC. I don't but between DC and the creator owned stuff, have to point out sort of an elephant in the room is that I don't see any work for Marvel. Is that just
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I grew up a Marvel kid, but you don't really control where your career goes.
yeah, sure.
Uh, I did, I did a mini series. Well, not a mini. It became a mini series. It was supposed to be a regular series. I did a book there with Robert Kirkman called The Irredeemable Ant-Man, and a lot of. I think it was a book that was a little before its time. It had a lot of the. It had a lot of the vibe of like that's kind of self-aware vibe that Squirrel Girl or Deadpool has, but it was a little before its time. Um, but we got to do 12 fun issues of Ant-Man, and some of that stuff has crept into the films, which is
Mhm.
which has been cool. So yeah, I did a year at Marvel, and I really had a good time there, and I would love to go back at some point,
Sure.
but DC keeps me busy with stuff, and it's hard to say no when they're really cool. When really cool projects come down the pipeline, it's hard to say no to them.
Cool. Well, before I let you go, I got to talk about one thing on Wikipedia. Is he is well known for his collection of comic book art. So
Yeah.
if you could speak a little bit about being a creator or a collector and what you're proud of there.
Yeah. I'm still a comic book collector and an original art collector because collecting original comic book art is almost like comic book collecting plus. It's like a
Hmm.
little bit deeper even. Every time you buy a comic book page, it is one of one. It's the only example of that piece. And also as an artist, I felt like I learned a lot about comic art from seeing it in person. And to me, there was just magic when I finally saw another artist originals. It was really engaging to me. So it wasn't too hard for me. Like the first time I got a decent paycheck from DC, I turned around and bought a Frank Miller page with it. And that's back when Frank Miller pages weren't $60,000. But and it just blossomed from there. And I love seeing not only the people that inspired me when I was a kid, but all the new artists that are coming down the pike that are really doing comics in a new and exciting way. And it's like that collector gene is in me, that like when every time I see a neat new artist, I'm like, oh, I've got to get a hold of one of their pages. And so that obsession has not stopped. I should stop. It's a very expensive hobby.
As probably reminded by your wife, right?
Yes, yeah, it's very expensive, but luckily I have a little equation going, which is if I go to a convention and I make money at the convention, I can spend it at the convention. So, if I have a good convention, I can turn around and buy a nice piece at the convention.
That's fantastic. Well, we've gone up to the present day, and I think we learned a lot about your career, and it's been a real pleasure to have you as a comic book fan. It's thrilling to get to do these, and obviously, someone living in Davenport, Iowa, I could have done this in person. We could.
Yeah, really, we could have met at the I-80 truck stop.
Yeah, exactly. But it's been a real pleasure, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, anytime, and I hope to run into you sometime in person.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is Ryan Murphy. Thanks for watching the channel. And until next time, I guess we'll see you next time. I don't have a good outro yet, but we'll see you next time.